My name is Gemma, and at 28 years old, I stood alone at my medical school graduation, clutching the diploma I'd worked 8 years to earn. The two empty seats in the front row screamed louder than any applause could. My parents had chosen my sister's impromptu Bahamas vacation over the biggest achievement of my life. As I stared at those vacant chairs, my hand unconsciously touched the letter in my pocket, the one revealing Grandma Rose's $500,000 inheritance meant solely for me. That was the moment I decided they'd never see a penny of it. Before we dive into this incredible journey of betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who's experienced family favoritism? Hit that like button if you believe real family shows up when it matters most, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself. Trust me, what happens next will show you exactly why blood isn't always thicker than water, and sometimes the family we choose becomes our greatest blessing. Growing up as the younger sister to Brittany was like being a shadow in my own home. She was 30 now, 2 years older than me, and had perfected the art of being our parents' universe while I orbited somewhere in the outer reaches of their attention. The pattern started early and never stopped. I remember my first real achievement at age 10 when I won the district science fair with a project on renewable energy that I'd spent 3 months perfecting. The morning of the awards ceremony, Brittany suddenly needed to attend an emergency cheerleading practice that she'd forgotten to mention. My parents didn't hesitate. They dropped everything to drive her 40 minutes across town while I stood on that stage accepting my trophy from the principal, scanning the audience for faces that would never appear. The other parents whispered about the little girl whose family couldn't be bothered to show up. Mrs. Chen from next door drove me home that day, and I still remember how she squeezed my shoulder and said nothing because what could you say to a child whose parents chose pom-poms over academic excellence? By high school, I'd learned to expect nothing and somehow still ended up disappointed. When I earned valedictorian status with a perfect 4.0 GPA while juggling 3 part-time jobs, my parents were dealing with Brittany's latest crisis. Her boyfriend of 2 weeks had broken up with her, and apparently, this required an immediate family intervention. They sat with her for hours that day, ordering her favorite takeout and reassuring her that she was perfect while I delivered my valedictorian speech to an audience that included everyone except the 2 people I'd foolishly hoped might care. The school photographer caught me mid-speech, and in that photo, you can see me looking past the crowd to the doors, still waiting. College brought financial favoritism to new heights. Brittany had dropped out of community college twice and was on her 3rd attempt at a degree in communications, which meant taking 1 class per semester while working part-time at our uncle's insurance office where she mostly filed her nails and flirted with clients. My parents paid for everything including her apartment, car insurance, and weekly shopping sprees because she was finding herself. Meanwhile, I was accepted into a prestigious pre-med program with partial scholarships that still left me drowning in student loans. When I asked for help with textbooks that cost more than a month's rent, my mother sighed and said they were already stretched thin supporting Brittany's journey of self-discovery. I worked overnight shifts at the hospital while maintaining Dean's List status, running on 3 hours of sleep and instant ramen because my family's financial priorities were crystal clear. Through all of this, there was one person who saw me, really saw me. Grandma Rose, my mother's mother, was the sole beacon of recognition in my life. She'd call me after every exam, remember every achievement, and most importantly, she noticed the pattern everyone else ignored. During holiday dinners, she'd watch my parents fawn over Brittany's latest mundane accomplishment while my full scholarship to medical school went unmentioned. She'd catch my eye across the table and wink, later pulling me aside to say she was proud of me. When Brittany would interrupt my stories to talk about her new highlights or latest drama, Grandma Rose would firmly redirect the conversation back to me. She attended my undergraduate graduation when my parents couldn't make it due to Brittany's wisdom tooth extraction, sitting front row center with a sign that read, "That's my granddaughter, the future doctor." What I didn't know until much later was that Grandma Rose had been documenting everything. Every missed event, every financial slight, every moment when I was pushed aside for Brittany's convenience. She'd kept a journal that detailed the systematic emotional neglect, and more importantly, she'd made decisions about her substantial estate that reflected what she'd observed. After one particularly painful Christmas where my parents gave Brittany a new car while I received a $25 gift card, Grandma Rose met with her lawyer and changed everything. The day before my medical school graduation, I was cleaning out the mailbox at my tiny studio apartment when I found the letter from Henderson and Associates law firm. My hands shook as I read words that seemed impossible. Grandma Rose had left me everything. The house she'd lived in for 50 years, her investment portfolio, and liquid assets totaling just over $500,000. The letter included a personal note in her handwriting. My dearest Gemma, you've earned every penny through your dedication and grace. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for accepting what you deserve. This is my investment in someone who invests in herself. I sat on my kitchen floor and sobbed, not for the money but for the validation. Someone had seen my worth when my own parents couldn't. The timing felt cosmic, arriving just as I was about to walk across that stage and accept my medical degree. I decided not to tell anyone yet, needing time to process this gift and what it meant. That night, I called my parents one more time about graduation, hoping maybe this time would be different. My mother answered on the third ring, laughing at something in the background. When I reminded her about the ceremony, she grew quiet before launching into excuses. Brittany had surprised them with a last-minute vacation to the Bahamas, some deal she'd found online that was too good to pass up. They'd already packed and couldn't possibly disappoint her by canceling now. Didn't I understand that Brittany rarely planned anything and this showed real growth? They'd celebrate with me when they got back, she promised, maybe dinner at that chain restaurant I liked. I hung up without saying goodbye, staring at the inheritance letter and realizing that Grandma Rose had given me more than money. She'd given me permission to stop begging for scraps of attention from people who had already shown me exactly where I stood in their priorities. Graduation day arrived with the kind of perfect May weather that should have made everything magical. I adjusted my cap one final time in the bathroom mirror, trying not to look at my phone where the family group chat showed photos of my parents and Brittany boarding their flight to Nassau. My mother had sent a string of heart emojis with the message, "Thinking of you, sweetie," as if that somehow compensated for their absence. I turned off my phone and headed to the ceremony alone. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as hundreds of families gathered to celebrate their loved ones' achievements. I found my assigned seat among my classmates, trying not to notice how they waved enthusiastically at packed rows of supporters. The 2 seats I'd reserved for my parents remained conspicuously empty even as the ceremony began. Dr. Patricia Williams, our dean, opened with a speech about the village it takes to create a doctor, how medical school success stems from family support and sacrifice. I kept my eyes fixed forward, refusing to let anyone see how those words cut through me. Halfway through the ceremony, my phone vibrated despite being on silent. Against my better judgment, I glanced at it to find Brittany's Instagram story. There she was, pristine in a white bikini, raising a mimosa with my parents on either side of her. The caption read, "Best family vacation ever. Sometimes you just need to get away from all the stress." The timestamp showed they posted it exactly when my name was being called to receive my diploma. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and walked across that stage with my head held high, accepting my degree with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos and celebrations, I stood awkwardly by the exit planning my escape. That's when Mrs. Johnson approached me. She was the mother of my classmate Robert, and we'd studied together occasionally throughout medical school. Her warm smile faltered when she noticed I was alone. "Where's your family, dear?" she asked gently. When I mumbled something about them being unable to attend, she exchanged a look with her husband that spoke volumes. Without hesitation, she linked her arm through mine and declared that I was joining them for their celebration dinner. I protested weakly, but Mr. Johnson was already steering me toward their car, insisting that no newly minted doctor should celebrate alone. The Johnsons took me to an elegant steakhouse downtown where they'd reserved a private dining room. Their extended family welcomed me like I'd always belonged there, raising endless toasts to both Robert and me. His grandmother pulled me aside to tell me how proud she was, his aunts fussed over my achievements, and his younger siblings peppered me with questions about medical school. For 3 hours, I experienced what family celebration actually felt like. When Mrs. Johnson hugged me goodbye, she whispered that I was welcome at their table anytime, and I had to blink back tears at the maternal warmth I'd been craving my entire life. I returned to my apartment emotionally drained but oddly fulfilled until I noticed something was wrong. The door was unlocked, though I distinctly remembered checking it twice before leaving. Inside, drawers were pulled open and papers scattered across my desk. My emergency key was missing from its hiding spot under the doormat. The sick feeling in my stomach intensified when I reached my bedroom and found my grandmother's jewelry box empty. Every piece she'd left me, including her wedding ring and the pearl necklace she wore every Sunday, was gone. My hands shook as I called my parents, praying I was wrong about what this meant. My father answered from what sounded like a beach bar, music blaring in the background. When I demanded to know if they'd been in my apartment, he laughed like I'd told a joke. Of course they had, he said. They'd driven back from the airport to grab some things before their flight. Brittany had always admired Grandma Rose's jewelry, and wasn't a time I shared with my sister? After all, I'd gotten to spend more time with Rose during her final years while Brittany was busy living her life. The jewelry was just sitting there collecting dust, and Brittany could actually put it to good use looking nice on vacation. The conversation devolved into the kind of confrontation we'd never had before. 28 years of suppressed hurt erupted as I demanded they return what they'd stolen. My mother got on the phone, her voice sharp with indignation. How dare I use words like stolen about family? They had every right to distribute Rose's things fairly, and it was selfish of me to hoard sentimental items. When I reminded them about missing my graduation, she actually laughed. They'd known about the ceremony for months, she admitted, but Brittany's deal was too good to pass up, and surely I understood that opportunities like that didn't come around often. Medical school graduations happened every year, but when would they get another chance at a free beach vacation? My father took the phone back to deliver what he clearly thought was wisdom. Brittany needed their support more than I did. I'd always been independent, capable, strong. I didn't need them the way she did. Brittany struggled with confidence and direction, requiring constant validation and assistance. Wasn't it a compliment that they trusted me to handle life on my own? He actually expected me to thank them for their neglect, to be grateful they'd ignored me in favor of enabling my sister's learned helplessness. I hung up on them mid-sentence, staring at the empty jewelry box and finally understanding with crystal clarity that this wasn't neglect born from distraction or circumstance. This was a conscious choice they'd made every single day of my life. They knew exactly what they were doing when they missed every milestone, when they funded Brittany's failures while I struggled, when they broke into my home to take the few precious items that connected me to the one person who'd loved me properly. This wasn't a family having different priorities. This was a family that had deliberately chosen to exclude one member while embracing another, and they felt so entitled to this dynamic that they couldn't even pretend to feel guilty about it. That night, I sat surrounded by the mess they'd left behind and made a decision. Grandma Rose had seen this coming. She'd known exactly who her daughter and son-in-law were, which is why she'd protected her legacy by leaving it to me. They had no idea about the inheritance yet, but when they found out, I already knew they'd feel entitled to that too. They'd use the same logic about family sharing, about Brittany needing it more, about me being too independent to deserve help. But Rose had given me more than money. She'd given me the power to finally say no, to stop participating in their twisted family dynamic, to choose my own path without seeking their approval or support. Tomorrow, I would meet with the lawyer and start the process of claiming what was mine. And when my family inevitably came calling, they would discover that their actions had finally freed me from any obligation to share anything with them ever again. The law offices of Henderson and Associates occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that made me feel simultaneously important and impossibly small. Mr. Henderson himself greeted me in the reception area, a distinguished man in his 60s who'd handled my grandmother's affairs for decades. His handshake was firm and his smile genuine as he led me to a conference room that probably cost more to furnish than my entire education. "Your grandmother was quite a woman," he began, spreading documents across the polished table. "She came to me 2 years ago with very specific instructions about her estate. She wanted to ensure everything was ironclad, no room for contestation." The numbers on the pages made me dizzy. Beyond the 500,000 in liquid assets, there were investment accounts, bonds, and her house in the historic district now valued at 300,000. The total estate approached nearly $1 million, carefully grown through decades of smart investments and frugal living that no one in our family had suspected. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma Rose's distinctive handwriting. Inside, her letter explained everything. She'd watched my parents' favoritism with growing disgust, documenting instances in a journal she'd kept for years. She wrote about watching me work 3 jobs while they paid for Brittany's 4th attempt at finding herself. She'd seen them miss my science fairs, my graduations, my achievements big and small while never missing a single event in Brittany's life no matter how trivial. The final straw had been that Christmas with the car, when they'd given Brittany a brand new vehicle while I received a gift card despite my own car having died 2 months earlier. That night, she'd decided her legacy would correct their injustice. "She was very clear," Mr. Henderson continued, "that your parents and sister were to receive nothing. She actually used stronger language than that, but I'll spare you the exact quotes. She set up the estate to transfer directly to you with no requirement for distribution to other family members. She also insisted on a clause that states any attempt to contest the will would result in the challenger paying all legal fees from their own pockets." He smiled slightly. "Your grandmother anticipated they might try to claim undue influence or mental incapacity, so she had 3 doctors certify her cognitive health and recorded a video statement explaining her decisions. Would you like to see it?" I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. On his laptop screen, Grandma Rose appeared, looking directly at the camera with those sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She spoke clearly and firmly about watching her daughter fail as a mother, about seeing me bloom despite neglect, about wanting her life's work to support someone who understood the value of hard work and perseverance. She ended by looking directly into the camera and saying, "Gemma, sweetheart, don't you dare feel guilty for accepting what you've earned. This isn't charity. This is justice." I was still processing everything when my phone exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls from my mother, dozens of texts in the family group chat. My cousin Derek had let slip at a family barbecue that Grandma Rose had left a substantial estate. He didn't know the details, but the mere mention of money had sent my parents into a frenzy. The texts evolved from casual inquiries about getting together to increasingly desperate demands for an immediate family meeting. Brittany had even private messaged me for the first time in 2 years, suddenly interested in how her favorite sister was doing and mentioning how much she missed our grandmother. Within 48 hours, the love bombing campaign reached ridiculous heights. My mother showed up at my apartment with my favorite childhood cookies, talking about how proud they were of my graduation and how sorry they were about missing it due to unavoidable circumstances. She hinted heavily about Grandma Rose's estate, wondering aloud about when the family would meet with the lawyers to distribute everything fairly. When I remained noncommittal, she became more direct, reminding me that she was Rose's daughter and had natural rights to her mother's belongings. My father called repeatedly, leaving voicemails about family responsibility and how Grandma Rose would have wanted her estate to benefit everyone. He mentioned Brittany's student loans from her abandoned degrees, her credit card debt, her need for a fresh start. Surely I understood that inheritance should help those who needed it most? He actually suggested I was being selfish by not immediately offering to share whatever small amount Grandma might have left me. The breaking point came when I returned from a hospital shift to find them in my apartment again, this time systematically searching through my papers. My mother was at my desk, rifling through drawers, while my father checked filing cabinets. They didn't even have the decency to look ashamed when I caught them. Instead, my mother straightened up and demanded to know why I was hiding information about the estate. Didn't they have a right to know what their own mother had left behind? My father backed her up, insisting that keeping secrets about family assets was tantamount to theft. I ordered them out, threatening to call the police if they didn't leave immediately. As they stormed toward the door, my mother turned back with a look of pure venom. "She was my mother," she hissed. "Whatever she left belongs to me, not some ungrateful child who can't even share with her own family." My father added that they knew their rights and would be contacting lawyers to ensure the estate was distributed properly. Brittany had needs, real needs, while I had a medical degree that would ensure I never wanted for anything. The selfishness of keeping Grandma's money when my sister struggled was unconscionable. That night, I made my decision. I researched Grandma Rose's favorite charity, the one she'd volunteered with for 20 years. The Johnson Medical Foundation provided scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing healthcare careers. Their mission statement talked about supporting those who worked hard despite circumstances, who showed dedication without family resources, who embodied perseverance in the face of adversity. It was like reading a description of my own journey through medical school. What made it even more perfect was the discovery that the foundation was actually run by the same Johnson family who'd embraced me at graduation. Mrs. Johnson served as president while her husband managed the financial aspects. The universe seemed to be pointing me toward a decision that would honor Grandma Rose while ensuring her legacy helped people who truly deserved support. I called Mr. Henderson the next morning to discuss my options. He listened without judgment as I explained my desire to donate the entire estate to the Johnson Medical Foundation. He warned me about the tax implications and the permanence of such a decision, but when he saw I was serious, he began drawing up the necessary paperwork. We agreed to create a named scholarship in Grandma Rose's honor, specifically for medical students who lacked family support. The scholarship would cover not just tuition but living expenses, textbooks, and the hidden costs that had nearly broken me during my own journey. It would ensure that no student had to choose between attending their own graduation and working an extra shift to pay rent. As we finalized the details, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. My phone continued buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from my family, but I no longer felt obligated to respond. They'd made their choices for 28 years, consistently prioritizing Brittany while treating me as an afterthought. Now I was making my choice, and it had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with honoring the one person who'd seen my worth. Grandma Rose had given me more than money, she'd given me the freedom to break the cycle of dysfunction and create something beautiful from her legacy. The Johnsons would ensure her money helped students like me for generations to come, and that felt more valuable than any amount sitting in my bank account. The registered letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who required signature confirmation. The law firm's name on the envelope was different from Mr. Henderson's, some aggressive-sounding partnership that specialized in estate disputes. My parents had hired serious legal firepower, and the contents of their filing made my blood run cold. They were claiming undue influence, alleging that I had manipulated a vulnerable elderly woman during her final years to steal their rightful inheritance. The document painted me as a calculating predator who had isolated Grandma Rose from her loving family to poison her mind against them. The lies were breathtaking in their audacity. According to their lawyer's narrative, I had prevented them from visiting Rose, intercepted her calls, and controlled her access to information. They claimed Brittany had been devastated by the loss of her grandmother, unable to properly grieve because I had selfishly monopolized Rose's final years. The fact that I'd visited Rose regularly while working full-time and attending medical school was twisted into evidence of my obsessive control. They conveniently omitted that Brittany hadn't visited once in 3 years, too busy with her social life to drive 20 minutes across town. Within days, the character assassination went public. Brittany, who had discovered a talent for social media manipulation, began posting tearful videos about losing her beloved grandmother's inheritance to her cruel, money-obsessed sister. She crafted a narrative where she was the victim of my greed, #garnering sympathy from strangers who didn't know our history. The comments sections filled with people calling me heartless, selfish, a disgrace to family values. She posted old photos of herself with Grandma Rose from years ago, carefully cropped to remove timestamps that would reveal how long it had been since she'd bothered to visit. Extended family members who had ignored me for years suddenly had strong opinions about my character. Aunt Linda, my mother's sister who hadn't spoken to me since I was 12, called to lecture me about family loyalty. Uncle Robert, who couldn't remember my name at the last reunion, sent a long email about how disappointed he was in my selfish behavior. Cousins who had never congratulated me on getting into medical school were now deeply concerned about my moral failings. The family group chat that had never included me in planning discussions became a forum for dissecting my greed and ingratitude. The threatening messages started subtly but escalated quickly. Unknown numbers would text warnings about karma catching up with thieves. Brittany's friends, rallied by her sob stories, sent Instagram messages calling me everything from a sociopath to a family destroyer. Someone found my LinkedIn profile and posted comments about how patients should beware of a doctor who would steal from her own grandmother. My residency program director called me in after someone sent an anonymous letter suggesting I might be stealing medications, clearly an attempt to destroy my career. Maya, my best friend from childhood who had stuck by me through everything, became my lifeline during this period. She was the one who noticed unusual activity around my apartment and suggested installing security cameras. Her instincts proved correct when we caught my parents on video using their stolen copy of my key to enter while I was at the hospital. The footage showed them methodically searching through everything, photographing documents, and attempting to access my laptop. They spent 2 hours in my apartment, leaving only when neighbors started returning from work. The violation of privacy extended to my financial life. I started receiving notices from credit monitoring services about multiple hard inquiries on my credit report. Banks I'd never heard of were processing loan applications in my name. Credit cards were being opened with my social security number, already maxed out with cash advances. The forensic accountant I hired to investigate uncovered a pattern dating back to when I turned 18. My parents had been using my identity for years, taking out small loans and credit cards that they'd default on just before damaging my credit too severely. They'd kept my credit score just high enough to remain useful while siphoning off thousands of dollars. Maya's mother, a semi-retired attorney who had watched me grow up, reviewed the evidence with growing disgust. She offered to represent me pro bono, appalled by what my parents had done. Together, we filed criminal charges for identity theft, breaking and entering, and harassment. The police detective assigned to our case discovered that the pattern went deeper than we'd initially found. They'd claimed me as a dependent on taxes years after I'd moved out, collecting refunds that should have been mine. They'd used my information to apply for benefits, utilities, even a car loan that they'd barely kept current to avoid complete default. The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. My residency performance suffered as I struggled to focus during procedures, my mind racing with legal strategies and safety concerns. I lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, surviving on coffee and whatever vending machine food I could grab between court appearances and police interviews. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, lying awake listening for sounds of another break-in. My attending physicians noticed my deterioration and expressed concern, but how could I explain that my own parents were trying to destroy me? Brittany's escalation reached new heights when she showed up at my ex-boyfriend Michael's apartment. We'd parted amicably 2 years prior when residency schedules made dating impossible, but remained friendly. She spun him a tale of family concern, claiming they just wanted to help me through what was clearly a mental breakdown. She suggested that my behavior was so out of character that they feared I might be using drugs, hence the financial desperation. Could Michael provide any information about my mental state? Did he have access to any of my passwords from when they dated? The transparency of her seduction attempt might have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic, but Michael saw through it immediately and warned me about their fishing expedition. Everything culminated in a confrontation at the hospital. My parents appeared during my shift, causing a scene in the lobby about needing to see their daughter for a family emergency. Security intercepted them, but not before they'd announced loudly that I was mentally unstable and they were trying to help me. Dr. Patricia Chen, my residency director, had to personally escort them out while they shouted about their rights as parents. The humiliation of watching my professional life collide with their toxic drama nearly broke me. That night, sitting in my vandalized car in the hospital parking garage, I finally made the call to Mr. Henderson. It was time to move forward with the donation and end this nightmare once and for all. The Johnson family, who had been following the drama with growing concern, offered me sanctuary. Mrs. Johnson insisted I stay in their guest house until the restraining order was processed, refusing to let me face this alone. For the first time since the inheritance letter arrived, I felt safe. Surrounded by a family that chose to protect me despite sharing no blood, I found the strength to see this through. My parents had shown their true colors in the most spectacular fashion, and now everyone could see what I'd always known. They weren't fighting for family justice or honoring Grandma Rose's memory. They were common criminals who happened to share my DNA, and I was done pretending otherwise. The forensic accountant's report read like a crime novel I never wanted to star in. Jennifer Martinez, recommended by Maya's mother, had uncovered 18 years of systematic financial abuse that began the month I turned 18. The evidence was methodical and damning. Every single loan, credit card, and financial account my parents had fraudulently opened in my name was documented with dates, amounts, and paper trails. The total damage exceeded $50,000, not including interest and fees that had accumulated over the years. They'd been smart enough to keep individual amounts small, flying under the radar of automatic fraud detection, but the pattern was undeniable when viewed comprehensively. Jennifer's investigation revealed the sick brilliance of their scheme. They'd maintained these accounts just actively enough to avoid immediate red flags, making minimum payments to keep them from going to collections while maximizing available credit. When one card would near its limit, they'd open another, using my excellent payment history on legitimate accounts to qualify for better terms. They'd even listed me as an authorized user on some of their own accounts to boost my credit score, ensuring I remained a viable target for their continued exploitation. The twisted part was realizing they'd probably justified it as helping me build credit history while funding Brittany's lifestyle. Maya's mother, Sandra Williams, transformed from family friend to fierce legal advocate as she reviewed the evidence. Her 40 years of legal experience showed in how she constructed our case, building an airtight prosecution that would be impossible to defend against. She subpoenaed years of financial records, uncovering a clear trail from the fraudulent accounts directly to my parents' bank accounts. They'd been sloppy in their arrogance, using the same IP address to apply for cards that they used for their regular online banking. Digital forensics proved they'd saved my personal information on their home computer, including password attempts for my various accounts. The criminal charges we filed were comprehensive and severe. Identity theft, fraud, breaking and entering, harassment, and attempted extortion barely scratched the surface of their crimes. Sandra included elder financial abuse charges related to their theft of Grandma Rose's jewelry, which they'd sold to a pawn shop for quick cash during their Bahamas trip. Security footage from the shop showed them laughing as they handed over Rose's wedding ring, the one she'd worn for 60 years until her death. The pawn shop owner, horrified to learn the items were stolen, cooperated fully with our investigation and provided receipts showing they'd sold family heirlooms for less than $2,000. The day Brittany was arrested at her workplace marked a turning point in the family drama. She'd been embezzling from her uncle's insurance company for months, assuming her family connection would protect her. The investigation into my identity theft had triggered a forensic audit of her employer's books, revealing she'd stolen over $30,000 through fraudulent claims and manipulated commissions. Her arrest was captured on the security cameras she didn't know existed, showing her screaming about how I'd ruined her life, how everything was my fault for being selfish with Grandma's money. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly her tearful social media videos about being a victim looked very different to her followers. My parents' response to their own legal troubles was predictably narcissistic. They showed up at the courthouse for my restraining order hearing with a camera crew they'd hired, claiming they were documenting their persecution by an ungrateful daughter. The judge was not amused, especially when they interrupted proceedings to accuse me of elder abuse and theft. When presented with evidence of their crimes, my mother actually laughed, insisting that parents had rights to their children's resources and that I owed them for raising me. My father declared that the forensic evidence was fabricated, that I'd conspired with lawyers to frame them because I was mentally unstable from the stress of medical school. The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. The restraining order was granted with a 1,000-foot requirement, meaning they couldn't come near my home, workplace, or any location I frequented. When my mother shrieked about her maternal rights, the judge calmly explained that criminal behavior voided any presumed family privileges. The courtroom security had to physically remove them when they refused to leave, still shouting about conspiracies and their victimization. The camera crew they'd hired captured it all, though probably not the narrative they'd intended to document. That evening, sitting in the Johnson family's living room, I played them the recording I'd managed to capture during one of my parents' unhinged voicemail rants. In their anger, they'd admitted everything, detailing how they'd used my information for years, how they felt entitled to it because I'd been selfish about helping family. They explicitly mentioned the credit cards, the loans, even their plan to claim power of attorney over me to access Grandma Rose's inheritance. Robert Johnson, a contract lawyer himself, confirmed the recording would be admissible as evidence. His parents simply held my hands as we listened to my biological family reveal their true nature in their own words. The public donation announcement was strategically timed for maximum impact. Mr. Henderson coordinated with the Johnson Medical Foundation to hold a press conference announcing the establishment of the Rose Martinez Memorial Scholarship Fund. The entire $1 million estate would provide full support for deserving medical students who lacked family resources. At the podium, I spoke about Grandma Rose's legacy of hard work and compassion, how she'd wanted her life savings to lift up those who struggled without support. I never mentioned my parents or sister by name, but anyone following the legal drama understood the subtext when I talked about choosing to create family through bonds of love and respect rather than blood alone. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Donors inspired by the story began contributing to the scholarship fund, expanding its reach beyond what Grandma Rose's estate alone could achieve. Medical students from across the state reached out with their own stories of family abandonment and financial struggle. Local news featured segments on toxic family dynamics and the importance of chosen family. The Johnson Medical Foundation website crashed from traffic as people sought to learn more about their work. What had started as my grandmother's final gift was becoming a movement that would support generations of students like me. My parents' final desperate attempt came in the form of a leaked tell-all interview with a gossip blog. They painted themselves as loving parents whose ungrateful daughter had been corrupted by money, claiming I'd stolen their mother's affection and inheritance through manipulation. The article might have gained traction except for one crucial mistake: they'd included details about their financial schemes while trying to justify them as normal parental behavior. Sandra immediately filed additional charges based on their public admissions, and the blog faced legal action for publishing defamatory content. Their attempt at revenge had only provided more evidence for our criminal case. The courtroom was packed on Judgment Day, filled with medical colleagues, the Johnson family, and various relatives who'd chosen sides in what had become a very public family destruction. My parents sat at the defendant's table looking haggard and diminished, their expensive lawyer unable to hide the mountain of evidence against them. Brittany was notably absent, having negotiated a separate plea deal for her embezzlement charges that included testifying against our parents in exchange for reduced sentencing. Even facing prison time, she couldn't resist playing victim and betrayer simultaneously. Judge Catherine Morgan delivered her verdict with measured precision that left no room for misinterpretation. Guilty on all counts of identity theft. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of breaking and entering. Guilty of harassment. The list continued through every charge Sandra had meticulously filed. My mother's wail when the judge read guilty of elder financial abuse echoed through the courtroom like a wounded animal. She'd maintained her innocence until that moment, but hearing her mother's memory invoked in criminal charges finally broke through her delusion. My father sat stone-faced, still convinced this was all an elaborate conspiracy against them. The restitution order was comprehensive and devastating to their financial future. They were ordered to repay every cent stolen through identity theft, plus interest and damages totaling over $80,000. The judge mandated wage garnishment for the next decade, ensuring they couldn't escape their obligations through bankruptcy. Additionally, they faced 6 months in county jail, though this was suspended pending successful completion of probation that included mandatory therapy for financial crimes and personality disorders. The no-contact order was made permanent, with criminal penalties for any attempt to communicate with me directly or through third parties. The scholarship ceremony 2 weeks later couldn't have provided a starker contrast to the courtroom drama. The Johnson Medical Foundation had transformed their annual gala into a celebration of the Rose Martinez Memorial Scholarship. The first recipient, Maria Santos, was a 23-year-old first-generation college graduate whose parents had disowned her for pursuing medicine instead of marrying young. As she spoke about working 3 jobs while studying for the MCAT, sleeping in her car between shifts, and almost giving up when textbook costs exceeded her rent, I saw my own story reflected in her journey. When she thanked me through tears, I told her she was thanking Grandma Rose, who understood that sometimes the families we're born in to fail us, but that shouldn't stop us from achieving our dreams. The ripple effects of the court case spread through my extended family like wildfire. Aunt Linda, who had been so quick to judge me, discovered my parents had also stolen her identity years ago for a utilities account they'd defaulted on. Uncle Robert found suspicious activity on his credit report that traced back to them. Cousins came forward with stories of loans never repaid, items borrowed and sold, trust repeatedly broken and forgiven in the name of family harmony. The facade of my parents as devoted family members crumbled as relative after relative realized they'd been victims too, just less thoroughly than I had been. Their house of cards collapsed spectacularly when the wage garnishments began affecting their ability to maintain their lifestyle. The home they'd refinanced multiple times to fund Brittany's whims went into foreclosure. Their car was repossessed. The country club membership they'd maintained while I ate ramen through medical school was cancelled for non-payment. They were forced to move into a small apartment in a decidedly non-prestigious neighborhood, the ultimate humiliation for people who'd always prioritized appearances over substance. The irony of them finally experiencing the financial stress they'd inflicted on me for years was not lost on anyone watching their downfall. Brittany's situation deteriorated even faster than our parents'. Her plea deal included 2 years probation and mandated restitution to her uncle's company. Unable to find work with a criminal record for embezzlement, she bounced between minimum wage jobs that barely covered her court-ordered payments. Her social media presence, once carefully curated to project success and victimhood, went dark after her followers turned against her. The final post before she deleted everything was a rant about how unfair life was, how she'd been betrayed by everyone, never once acknowledging her own role in her downfall. Last I heard, she'd married a man 30 years her senior who she'd met at a casino, desperately seeking someone to fund the lifestyle she felt entitled to. The collapse of their united front was perhaps the most satisfying aspect of their downfall. With no money to steal and no common enemy to unite against, they turned on each other with vicious precision. Mom blamed Dad for the criminal schemes, claiming she'd been manipulated into participating. Dad accused Mom of favoring Brittany to the point of criminal behavior. Brittany blamed both of them for raising her without boundaries or consequences. Their family dinners became screaming matches that prompted noise complaints from neighbors. The police were called multiple times for domestic disturbances, their mugshots becoming regular features in local arrest logs. The golden family they'd protected at my expense had revealed itself as fool's gold, crumbling at the first real pressure. Through all of this, I thrived in ways I'd never imagined possible. Without the constant drain of their toxicity and financial abuse, I excelled in my residency program. Dr. Chen nominated me for a prestigious fellowship in neurosurgery, noting my exceptional performance under pressure and natural leadership abilities. The Johnson family formally invited me to all family gatherings, introducing me as their bonus daughter to anyone who asked. Robert and I became genuine siblings, studying together and supporting each other through the brutal residency years. His parents attended every significant milestone in my career with the pride my biological parents had reserved exclusively for Brittany's mediocrity. The most unexpected gift came in the form of Ben Chen, no relation to my program director despite the shared surname. He was a pediatric surgeon who'd followed the scholarship story and reached out to offer additional funding support. Our first coffee meeting to discuss the foundation turned into a 4-hour conversation about medicine, family trauma, and the importance of chosen connections. He understood the weight of family betrayal, having been disowned by his parents for choosing medicine over the family business. 6 months later, he proposed at the second annual scholarship gala, with Grandma Rose's restored ring that we'd recovered from the pawn shop. The Johnson family immediately claimed him as a bonus son, expanding their informal adoption to include both of us. The scholarship fund grew beyond anything we'd imagined. By the third year, we were supporting 20 students across the state, all brilliant minds who might have given up without financial support. They formed their own chosen family, studying together, supporting each other through difficult rotations, and celebrating victories that their biological families couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. At each graduation, I watched them cross stages with the Johnson family and other scholarship supporters in the audience, ensuring no one stood alone the way I had. Grandma Rose's legacy had become a movement that redefined what family meant for hundreds of future doctors. 1 year after the court verdict, I stood at the podium of the third annual Rose Martinez Memorial Scholarship Ceremony, looking out at a sea of faces that reflected every kind of broken family story imaginable. The grand ballroom sparkled with hope rather than heartbreak as 50 scholarship recipients and their chosen families gathered to celebrate resilience over blood relations. My hands no longer trembled when speaking about family trauma. The words flowed with the authority of someone who had survived and thrived despite everything designed to break me. Family betrayal is a unique kind of wound, I told the audience, many dabbing at tears. It strikes at our fundamental need for belonging and safety. When the people who should protect us become our greatest threats, it reshapes how we see the world. But tonight, looking at all of you, I see proof that we can create better families than the ones we were born into. Grandma Rose knew this truth. She chose to see me when my parents couldn't. She chose to invest in potential rather than enable dysfunction. Each of you represents her belief that love is an action, not an obligation. The statistics I shared painted a stark picture. 70% of our scholarship recipients had experienced family financial abuse, 40% had been disowned for their career choices, and nearly all had been told they were selfish for prioritizing education over family demands. Yet here they stood, future doctors who would save lives because someone believed in them when their blood relatives didn't. Maria Santos, our first recipient, had just matched into a prestigious cardiology fellowship. She spoke about performing her first solo surgery while her chosen family of fellow scholarship recipients watched from the observation deck, the same way the Johnson family had filled those empty seats at my graduation. My parents had attempted contact 3 times through various flying monkeys, always with the same manipulation tactics. A cousin would mention how sad they looked, how much they'd aged, how sorry they claimed to be. Church friends passed along messages about forgiveness and redemption. Even a therapist they'd briefly seen tried to arrange a reconciliation session, though she quickly backed off when Sandra sent a cease and desist letter. Each attempt was documented and reported, strengthening the no-contact order. They'd learned nothing from their downfall, still believing they were victims of an ungrateful daughter rather than criminals facing consequences. Ben and I married in the Johnsons' backyard, surrounded by scholarship recipients, medical colleagues, and the sprawling chosen family we'd built together. Mrs. Johnson walked me down the aisle while her husband officiated, having gotten ordained specifically for the occasion. Grandma Rose's picture sat in the front row next to an empty chair, her presence felt in every moment. During the father-daughter dance, I danced with Mr. Johnson, then with each male scholarship recipient who'd also been abandoned by their fathers. There wasn't a dry eye as we transformed a traditionally painful moment for fatherless brides into a celebration of chosen bonds. My biological parents weren't invited, naturally, but they made their presence known by sending a process server during the reception. They were suing for emotional damages, claiming my success had come at the cost of their mental health. The wedding guests actually laughed when the papers were read aloud, the absurdity of their continued victimhood mentality providing comic relief. Sandra caught the bouquet and immediately volunteered to handle this latest frivolous lawsuit pro bono, joking that fighting my parents had become her favorite hobby. The real healing came through helping others navigate similar trauma. The support group I started at the hospital grew into a nonprofit organization offering resources for medical professionals dealing with toxic families. We provided emergency funding for students whose parents withdrew support, legal resources for those facing financial abuse, and most importantly, a community of people who understood that sometimes losing your biological family means winning your life back. The program partnered with medical schools across the country, normalizing the conversation about family estrangement and professional success. As I placed flowers on Grandma Rose's grave with Ben and the Johnsons beside me, I whispered, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for giving me the power to choose my own family. Thank you for showing me that love multiplies when given to those who deserve it." The scholarship recipients who joined us that day understood. We were all Grandma Rose's legacy, proof that one person's choice to see worth where others see obligation can change generations. What questions did my story bring up for you? Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams? Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the most difficult circumstances. Share this with someone who needs to hear that chosen family can be more powerful than blood relations. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, the best families are often the ones we build for ourselves.